All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another stream of reading Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. So, I'm just going to give a quick little synopsis as to where we are right now. So, we are currently with a man named Mr. Lockwood, who is a tenant of Mr. Heathcliff. And he's met Mr. Heathcliff and all of his family. He's kind of just really kind of blown away about how bizarre they are. And he's talking to his maid at the place that he is staying. And he's like, Mrs. Dean, tell me about these people. I want to learn about Mr. Heathcliff and who they are. So she's told him a story about Mr. Heathcliff when he was younger and how Mr. Heathcliff and this woman named Catherine were very interested in each other, were playmates, and it's really starting to give the impression that these two love each other very dearly. And another thing to just kind of mention is that Mr. Heathcliff is technically an adopted child. So now we're going to start learning more about what happened, what events led to Mr. Heathcliff eventually having Wuthering Heights, and being kind of like the owner of that and the land around it. And that's kind of where we're going right now. So as I continue reading, I'm going to be reading from the perspective of Mrs. Dean, and she is talking about her account of events, and she's telling this to Mr. Lockwood. So I say this because it can get a little confusing sometimes the way that this jumps around a little bit, but hopefully that provides a little context. But anyway, shall we go on? Chapter 8. On the morning of a fine June day, my first bonny little nursling and the last of the ancient Earnshaw stock was born. We were busy with the hay in a faraway field, when the girl that was usually brought for our breakfasts came running an hour too soon, across the meadow and up the lane, calling me as she ran. "Oh, such a grand bairn," she panted out, "the finest lad that has ever breathed. But the doctor says Missus must go, says she's been in a consumption these many months. I heard him tell Mr. Hindley, and now she has nothing to keep her, and she'll be dead before winter. You must come directly. You're to nurse it, Nellie, and to feed it with sugar and milk, and take care of it day and night. I wish I were you, because it will be all yours when there is no missus." "Aye, but is she very ill?" I asked, flinging down my rake and tying my bonnet. "I guess she is, yet she looks bravely," replied the girl, "and she talks as if she has no thought of the living to see it grow into a man. She's had her head for joy. It's such a beauty. If I were her, I'm certain I would not die. I should get better at bare sight of it, in spite of Kenneth. I was fairly mad at him. Dame Archer brought the cherub, fairly mad at him, and brought it straight down to the master in the house, and his face just began to light up. Then the old croaker stepped forward and said, he, Earnshaw, be a blessing to your wife, and spare to leave you this son. When she came, I felt convinced we wouldn't sleep for long, and now I must tell you the winter will probably finish her. Don't take care on and fret about it too much. It can't be helped, and besides, you should have known better than to choose such a rush of a lass." "And what did the master say?" I inquired. "I think he swore, but he didn't mind. I was straining to see the bairn," and she began to describe it rapturously. I, as zealous as herself, hurriedly eager home to admire, on my part, though I was very sad for Hindley's sake. He had room in his heart only for two idols, his wife and himself. He doted on both and adored one, and I couldn't conceive how he would bear the loss. When we got to Wuthering Heights, there he stood at the front door, and as I passed in, I asked, "How was the babe?" "Nearly ready to run about, Nell," he replied, putting on a cheerful smile. "And the mistress?" I ventured to inquire. "The doctor says she's—" "Damn the doctor," he interrupted, reddening. "Frances is quite right. She'll be perfectly well by this time next week. Are you going upstairs? Will you tell her that I'll come if she promised not to talk? I left her because she would not hold her tongue, and she must tell her Mr. Kenneth says she must be quiet. I delivered this message to Mrs. Earnshaw. She seemed in flighty spirits and replied merrily, I hardly spoke a word, Ellen, and there he has gone out twice crying. Well, say I promise I won't speak, but that does not bind me to not laugh at him. Poor soul, till within a week of her death that gay heart never failed her, and her husband persisted doggedly, nay, furiously, in affirming her health improved every day. When Kenneth warned him that his medicines were useless at that stage of the malady, and he needn't put him to further expense by attending her, he retorted, I know you need not. She's well. She does not want any more attendance from you. She never was in a consumption. It was a fever, and it is gone. Her pulse is as slow as mine now, and her cheek as cool. He told his wife the same story, and she seemed to believe him. But one night, while leaning on his shoulder, in the act of saying she thought she should be able to get up tomorrow, a fit of coughing took her, a very slight one. He raised her in his arms. She put her 2 hands about his neck. Her face changed, and she was dead. As the girl had anticipated, the child Hareton fell wholly into my hands. Mr. Earnshaw, provided he saw him healthy and never heard him cry, was contented as far as regarded him. For himself he grew desperate. His sorrow was that of a kind that will not lament. He neither wept nor prayed. He cursed and defied, execrated God and man, and gave himself up to reckless dissipation. The servants could not bear his tyrannical and evil conduct long. Joseph and I were the only 2 that would stay. I had not the heart to leave my charge, and besides, you know, I had been his foster sister, and excused his behavior more readily than a stranger would. Joseph remained to Hector over tenants and laborers, and because it was his vocation to be where he had plenty of wickedness to reprove. The master's bad ways and bad companions formed a pretty example for Catherine and Heathcliff. His treatment of the latter was enough to make a fiend of a saint, and truly it appeared as if the lad possessed of something diabolical at that period. He delighted to witness Hindley degrading himself past redemption, and became daily more notable for savage sullenness and ferocity. I could not half tell what an infernal house we had. The curates dropped calling, and nobody decent came near us, at last, unless Edgar Linton's visits to Miss Cathy might be an exception. At 15, she was the queen of the countryside. She had no peer. She had the turn out of a haughty, headstrong creature. I own I did not like her after her infancy was past, and I vexed her frequently by trying to bring her down in her arrogance. She never took an aversion to me, though. She had a wondrous constancy to old attachments. Even Heathcliff kept his hold on her affections unalterably, and young Linton, with all his superiority, found it difficult to make an equally deep impression. He was my late master, and at his portrait over the fireplace, it used to hang to one side and his wife's on the other, but hers had been removed, or else you might see something of what she was. Can you make that out? Mrs. Dean raised a candle, and I discerned a soft-featured face, exceedingly resembling the young lady at the Heights, but more pensive and amiable in expression. It formed a sweet picture. The long, light hair curled slightly on the temples, the eyes were large and serious, the figure almost too graceful. I did not marvel how Catherine Earnshaw could forget her first friend for such an individual. I marveled much how he, with a mind to correspond with this person, could fancy my idea of a Catherine Earnshaw. A very agreeable portrait, I observed to the housekeeper. Is it like? Yes, she answered, but he looked better when he was animated, and his everyday countenance when he wanted to spirit in general. Catherine had kept up her acquaintance with the Lintons since her 5 weeks' residence among them, and as she had no temptation to show her rough side in their company, and had the sense to be ashamed of being rude where she experienced such invariable courtesy, she imposed unwittingly an old lady and gentleman by her ingenious cordiality, gained the admiration of Isabella and the heart and soul of her brother, acquisitions that flattered her from the first, for she was full of ambition, and led her to adopt a double character without exactly intending to deceive anyone. In the place where she had heard Heathcliff termed a vulgar young ruffian, and worse than a brute, she took care not to act like him. But at home she had small inclination to practice politeness that would only be laughed at in a restraint to an unruly nature when it would bring her neither credit nor praise. Mr. Edgar seldom mustered courage to visit Wuthering Heights openly. He had a terror of Earnshaw's reputation, and shrunk from encouraging him, and yet he was always received with our best attempts at civility. The master himself avoided offending him, knowing why he came, and if he could not be gracious, kept out of the way. I rather think his appearance there was distasteful to Catherine. She was not artful, never played the coquette, and had evidently an objection to her friends meeting at all. For when Heathcliff expressed contempt of Linton in his presence, she could not half coincide as she did in his absence. And when Linton evinced disgust and antipathy to Heathcliff, she dare not treat his sentiments with indifference, as if depreciation of her playmate were scarcely any consequence to her. I've had many a laugh at her perplexities and untold troubles, which she vainly strove to hide from my mockery. That sounds ill-natured, but she was so proud it became really impossible to pity her distress, till she should be chastened into more humility. She did bring herself finally to confess and confide in me. There was not a soul else that she might fashion into an adviser. Mr. Hindley had gone from home one afternoon, and Heathcliff presumed to give himself a holiday on the strength of it. He had reached the age of 16 then, I think, and without having bad features or being deficient in intellect, he contrived to convey an impression of inward and outward repulsiveness that his present aspect retains of no traces of. In the first place, he had led that time lost benefit of his early education, continual hard work, begun soon and concluded late, and extinguished any curiosity he once possessed in the pursuit of knowledge, and any love for books or learning. His childhood's sense of superiority instilled him into the favors of old Mr. Earnshaw. He struggled along to keep up an equality with Catherine in her studies, and yielded with poignant thought, though silent regret. But he yielded completely, and there was no prevailing him to take a step in the way of moving upward when he found he must necessarily sink beneath his former level. Then personal appearance sympathized with mental deterioration. He acquired a slouching gait and an ignoble look. His naturally reserved disposition was exaggerated into an almost idiotic excess of unsociable moroseness, and he took a grim pleasure, apparently, in exciting the aversion rather than the esteem of his few acquaintances. Catherine and he were constant companions still, at his seasons of respite from labor, but he ceased to express his fondness for her in words, and recoiled with angry suspicion from her girlish caresses, as if conscious there could be no gratification in lavishing such marks of affection on him. On the before-named occasion, he came into the house to announce his intention of doing nothing, while I was assisting Miss Cathy to arrange her dress. She had not reckoned on his taking it into his head to be idle, and imagining she would have the whole place to herself, she managed, by some means, to inform Mr. Edgar of her brother's absence, and was then preparing to receive him. "Cathy, Are you busy this afternoon? Asked Heathcliff. Are you going anywhere? Why, no. It is raining, she answered. Why have you on that silk frock, then? He said. Nobody coming here, I hope. Not that I'm aware of, she said. But you should be in the field now, Heathcliff. It is not an hour past dinner time. I thought you were gone. Hindley goes often to see us free from his accursed presence, observed the boy. I'll not work any more today. I'll stay with you. Oh, but Joseph will tell, she suggested. You'd better go. Joseph is loading lime on the farther side of the Prinestone Crag. It'll take him till dark, and he'll never know. So saying, he lounged to the fire and sat down. Catherine reflected on instant, with knitted brows. She found it needful to smooth the way for an intrusion. Isabella and Edgar Linton talked of calling this afternoon, she said at the conclusion of the minute's silence. As it rains, I hardly expect them, but they may come, and if they do, you run the risk of being scolded for no good. Well, order Ellen to say you are engaged, Kathy, he persisted. Don't turn me out for those pitiful, silly friends of yours. I'm on the point sometimes of complaining that they, well, but I'll not. That they'll what? Cried Catherine, gazing at him with a troubled countenance. Oh, Nellie, she added petulantly, jerking her head away from my hands. You've combed my hair quite out of a curl. That's enough. Let me alone. What are you on the point of complaining about, Heathcliff? Nothing. Only look at the almanac on that wall. He pointed to a framed sheet hanging near the window and continued. The crosses are for the evenings you have spent with the Lintons and the dots for those spent with me. Do you see? I've marked every day. Yes, very foolish. As if I took notice, replied Catherine in a peevish tone. And where is the sense of that? To show that I do take notice, said Heathcliff. And I should always be sitting with you? She demanded, growing more irritated. What do I get? What do you talk about? You must be dumb or a baby for anything you say to amuse me, or for anything you do, either. You never told me before that I talked too little, or that you disliked my company, Kathy, exclaimed Heathcliff, much in agitation. It's no company at all, when people know nothing and say nothing, she muttered. Her companion rose up, but he hadn't time to express his feelings further, for a horse's feet were heard on the flags, and having knocked gently, young Linton entered, and his face was brilliant with delight at the unexpected summons he had received. Doubtless, Catherine marked the difference between her friends, as one came in and the other went out. The contrast resembled what you would see in exchanging a bleak, hilly, cold country for a beautiful, fertile valley, and his voice and greeting were as opposite as his aspect. He had a sweet, low manner of speaking, and pronounced his words as you do. That's less gruff we talk here, and more softer. I have not come too soon, have I? He said, casting a look at me. I had begun to wipe the plate and tidy some drawers at the far end of the dresser. Why, no, answered Catherine. What are you doing there, Nellie? My work, miss, I replied. She stepped behind me and whispered crossly, Take yourself and the dusters off. When company are in the house, servants don't commence scouring and cleaning in the room where they are. It is a good opportunity now that the master is away, I answered aloud. He hates me to be fidgeting over these things in his presence. I'm sure Mr. Edgar will excuse me. I hate you for being fidgeting in my presence, exclaimed the young lady imperiously, not allowing her guest time to speak. She had failed to recover her equanimity since the little dispute with Heathcliff. I'm sorry for it, Miss Catherine, was my response, and I proceeded assiduously with my occupation. She, supposing Edgar could not see her, snatched the cloth from my hand and pinched me with a prolonged wrench, very spitefully on my arm. I've said I do not love her, and I rather relished mortifying her vanity now and then. Besides, she hurt me extremely, so I started up from my knees and screamed out, "Oh, miss, that is a nasty trick. You have no right to nip me, and I'm not going to bear it." "I didn't touch you, you lying creature," she said, her fingers tingling to repeat the act, and her ears red with rage. She never had power to conceal her passion, and it always set her whole complexion ablaze. "Then what is that, then?" I retorted, showing a decidedly purple witness to refute her. She stamped her foot and waved a moment, and then, irresistibly impelled by the naughty spirit within her, slapped me on the cheek, a stinging blow that filled both my eyes with water. "Catherine, love, Catherine!" interposed Linton, greatly shocked at the double fault of falsehood and violence which his idol had committed. "Leave the room, Ellen," he repeated, trembling all over. Little Hareton, who followed me everywhere and was sitting near me on the floor, at seeing my tears commenced crying himself, and sobbed out complaints against wicked Aunt Cathy, which drew her fury onto his unlucky head. She seized his shoulders and shook him till the poor child waxed livid, and Edgar thoughtlessly laid hold of her hands to deliver him. In an instant one was wrung free, and the astonished young man felt it applied over his own ear in a way that could not be mistaken for jest. He drew back in consternation. I lifted Hareton into my arms and walked off to the kitchen with him, leaving the door of communication open, for I was curious to watch how they would settle their disagreement. The insulted visitor moved to the spot where he had laid his hat, pale with a quivering lip. "That is right," I said to myself. "Take their warning and be gone. It's a kindness to let you have a glimpse of her genuine disposition, eh?" "Where are you going?" demanded Catherine, advancing to the door. He swerved aside and attempted to pass. "You must not go," she exclaimed energetically. "I must and I shall," he replied in a subdued voice. "No," she persisted, grasping the handle. "Not yet, Edgar Linton. Sit down, please. You shall not leave me in that temper. I should be miserable all night, and I won't be miserable for you." "Can I stay after you have struck me?" asked Linton. Catherine was mute. "You've made me afraid and ashamed of you," he continued. "I'll not come here again." Her eyes began to glisten, her lids to twinkle. "And you told a deliberate untruth," he said. "I didn't," she cried, recovering her speech. "I did nothing deliberately. Well, go if you must. Get away. And now I'll cry myself sick." She dropped down on her knees by a chair and set to weeping in a serious earnest. Edgar persevered in his resolution as far as the court. There he lingered. I resolved to encourage him. "Miss is dreadfully wayward, sir," I called out. "As bad as any marred child. You'd better be riding home, or else will be sick, only to grieve us." The soft thing looked askance through the window. He possessed the power to depart, as much as a cat possesses the power to leave a mouse half killed, or a bird half eaten. "Ah," I thought, "there will be no saving him. He's doomed, and flies to his fate." And so it was. He turned abruptly and hastened into the house again, shut the door behind him, and when I went in a while after to inform them that Earnshaw had come home rabid drunk, ready to pull the place about our ears, I saw the quarrel had merely effected a closer intimacy, and had broken the outer works of a youthful timidity, and enabled them to forsake the guise of friendship and confess themselves lovers. Intelligence of Mr. Hindley's arrival drove Linton speedily to his horse, and Catherine to her chamber. I went to hide little Hareton, and to take the shot out of the master's fowling piece, which he was fond of playing with in his insane excitement, to the hazard of the lives of any who provoked or even attracted his notice too much. And I had hit upon the plan of removing it, that he might do less mischief if he did go to the length of firing the gun. Chapter 9. He entered, vociferating oaths dreadful to hear, caught me in the act of stowing his son away in the kitchen cupboard. Hareton was impressed with the wholesome terror of encountering either his wild beast's fondness or his madman's rage, for in one he ran a chance of being squeezed and kissed to death, and in the other of being flung into the fire or dashed against the wall, and the poor thing remained perfectly quiet wherever I chose to put him. "There, I've found it at last," cried Hindley, pulling me back by the skin of my neck like a dog. "By heaven and hell, you've sworn between you to murder that child. I know how it is, now that he is always out of my way, but with the help of Satan, I shall make you swallow the carving knife, Nellie. You needn't laugh, for I've just crammed Kenneth, head downmost, in the most blackbourne marsh, and two is the same as one, and I want to kill some of you. I shall have no rest till I do." "But you don't like the carving knife, Mr. Hindley," I answered. "It has been cutting red herrings. I'll rather be shot, if you please." "You'd rather be damned," he said, "and so shall. No law in England can hinder a man from keeping his house decent, and mine's abominable. Open your mouth." He held the knife in his hand and pushed its point between my teeth, but for my part I was never much afraid of his vagaries. Detestably, I would not take it on any account. "Oh," he shouted, releasing me, "I see that hideous little villain is out. I beg your pardon, Nell. If it be he who deserves flaying alive for not running to welcome me, and for screaming as if I were a goblin, unnatural cub, come hither. I'll teach thee to impose on a good-hearted, deluded father. Now, don't you think the lad would be handsomer cropped? It makes a dog fiercer, and I love something fierce. Get me scissors, something fierce and trim. Besides, it's an infernal affectation, devilish deceit it is, to cherish our ears. We are asses enough without them. Hush, child, hush. Well then, it is my darling. Wouldst thou eyes cry? There's a joy. Kiss me. What? It won't? Kiss me, Hareton. Damn thee, kiss me, by God, as if I would rear such a monster. As sure as I'm living, I'll break the brat's neck." Poor Hareton was squalling and kicking in his father's arms with all of his might, and redoubled his yells when he carried him upstairs and lifted him over the banister. I cried out that he would frighten the child into fits, and ran to rescue him. As I reached them, Hindley leaned forward on the rails to listen to a noise below, almost forgetting that he had Hareton in his hands. "Who is that?" he asked, hearing someone approaching the foot of the stairs. I leaned forward also, to purpose of signing to Heathcliff, whose step I recognized, not to come further, and at the instant when my eye quitted Hareton, he gave a sudden spring, delivering himself from the careless grasp that held him, and fell. There was scarcely time to experience a thrill of horror before we saw the little wretch was safe. Heathcliff arrived underneath just at a critical moment. By a natural impulse, he arrested his descent, and setting him on his feet, looked up to discover the author of the incident. A miser who has parted with lucky lottery ticket for 5 shillings and finds next day he has lost in the bargain £5,000, could not show a blanker countenance than he did on beholding a figure of Mr. Earnshaw above. It expressed a plainer than words could do the intensest anguish at having made himself the instrument of thwarting his own revenge. Had it been dark, I dare say, he would have tried to remedy the mistake by smashing Hareton's skull on the steps, but we witnessed his salvation, and I was presently below with my precious charge pressed to my heart. Hindley descended more leisurely, sobered and abashed. "It is your fault, Ellen," he said. "You should have kept him out of sight. You should have taken him from me. Is he injured anywhere?" "Injured?" I cried angrily. "If he is not killed, he'll be an idiot. How I wonder if why his mother does not rise from her grave to see how you use him. You're worse than a heathen, treating your own flesh and blood in that manner." He attempted to touch the child, who, on finding himself with me, sobbed of his terror directly. At the first finger his father laid on him, however, he shrieked again, louder than before, and struggled as if he would go into convulsions. "You shall not meddle with him," I continued. "He hates you. They all hate you. That is the truth. A happy little family you have here, and a pretty state you've come to." "I shall have come to a prettier yet, Nellie," laughed the misguided man, recovering his hardness. "At present convey yourself and him away, and hark you, Heathcliff, clear you too, quite from my reach and hearing. I wouldn't murder you tonight, unless, perhaps, I set the house on fire, but that's what my fancy goes." While saying this, he took a pint bottle of brandy from the dresser and poured some into a tumble. "Nay, don't," I entreated. "Mr. Hindley, do ye take warning. Have mercy on this unfortunate boy, if ye care nothing for yourself." "Anyone will do better for him than I shall," he answered. "Have mercy on your own soul," I said, endeavoring to snatch the glass from his hand. "Not I. On the contrary, I shall have great pleasure in sending it to perdition to punish its maker," exclaimed the blasphemer. "Here's to its hearty damnation." He drank the spirits and impatiently bade us go, terminating his command with a sequel of horrid imprecations, too bad to repeat or remember. "It's a pity he cannot kill himself with drink," she muttered. He's doing his very utmost, but his constitution defines him. Mr. Kenneth says he would wager his mare that he'll outlive any man on this side of Gimmerton, and to go to a grave a hoary sinner, unless some happy chance out of the common course befall him," said Heathcliff. I went into the kitchen and sat down to lull my little lamb to sleep. Heathcliff, as I thought, walked through to the barn. It turned out afterwards that he only got as far as the other side to settle, when he flung himself on a bench by the wall, removed from the fire, and remained silent. I was rocking Hareton on my knee, and humming a little song that began, "It was far in the night, in the barnies great, the mither beneath the mools heard that," when Miss Cathy, who listened to the hubbub in her room, put her head in and whispered, "Are you alone, Nellie?" "Yes, miss," I replied. She entered and approached the hearth. I, supposing she was going to say something, looked up. The expression of her face seemed disturbed and anxious. Her lips were half asunder, as if she meant to speak, and she drew a breath, but it escaped a sigh instead of a sentence. I resumed my song, not having forgotten her recent behavior. "Where's Heathcliff?" she said, interrupting me. "About his work in the stable," was my answer. He did not contradict me. Perhaps he had fallen into a doze. There followed another long pause, during which I perceived a drop or two trickle from Catherine's cheek to the flags. Is she sorry for her shameful conduct? I asked myself. That will be a novelty, but she may come to the point as she will. I shan't help her. No, she felt small trouble regarding any subject, save her own concerns. "Oh, dear," she cried at last, "I am very unhappy." "Ah, pity," I observed. "You're too hard to please, so many friends and so few cares, and can't make yourself content." "Oh, Nellie, will you keep a secret from me?" she pursued, kneeling down by me and lifting her winsome eyes to my face with that sort of look which turns off bad temper, even when one has all in the right in the world to indulge it. "Is it worth keeping?" I inquired, less sulkily. "Yes, and it worries me, and I must let it out. I want to know, what should I do? Today, Edgar Linton has asked me to marry him, and I've given him an answer. Now, before I tell you whether it was a consent or a denial, you must tell me which it ought have been." "Really now, Miss Catherine, how can I know?" I replied. "To be sure, considering the exhibition ye performed in his presence this afternoon, I might say it would be wiser to refuse him. Since he asked you, after that, he must be either hopelessly stupid or venturesome fool." "If you talk so, I won't tell you any more," she returned peevishly, rising to her feet. "I accepted him, Nellie. Be quick, and say whether I was wrong." "What? You accepted him? That was what in discussing the matter? You have pledged your word and cannot be retract." "But say whether I should have done so, or do," she exclaimed in an irritable tone, chafing her hands together and frowning. "Aye, there are so many things to be considered. That question cannot be answered properly," I said sententiously. "First and foremost, do you love Mr. Edgar?" "Oh, who can help it? Of course I do," she answered. Then I put through the following catechism for a girl of 22. It was not just injudicious. "But why do you love him, Miss Cathy?" "Nonsense, I do. That's sufficient." "By no means. You must say why." "Well, because he is handsome and pleasant to be with."
"Bad," was my commentary.
"And because he's young and cheerful."
"Bad still."
"And because he loves me."
"Indifferent. Coming there."
"And he will be rich, and I shall like to do the greatest woman of the neighborhood, and shall be proud of having such a husband."
"Worst of all. And now you say you love him?"
"As everybody loves." "You're silly, Nellie."
"Not at all. Answer."
"I love the ground under his feet, and the air over his head, and everything he touches, and every word he says. I love all his looks and all of his actions, and him entirely and altogether. There now."
"And why?"
"Nay, you are making a jest of it, and it is exceedingly ill-natured. It is no jest to me," said the young lady, scowling and turning her face to the fire.
"I am very far from jesting, Miss Catherine," I replied. "You love Mr. Edgar because he is handsome and young and cheerful and rich, and loves you. The last, however, goes for nothing. You love him without that probability, and with you wouldn't unless he possessed the four firmer attractions."
"No, to be sure not. I should only pity him, hate him perhaps, if he were ugly and a clown."
"But there are several other handsome, rich young men in the world, handsomer possibly, and richer than he is. What would hinder you from loving them?"
"Well, if there be any, they are out of my way. I've seen none like Edgar."
"Aye, but you may see some more, and he won't always be handsome and young, and may not always be rich."
"Well, he is now, and I have only to do with the present. I wish you would speak rationally."
"Well, that settles it. If you have only to do with the present, marry Mr. Linton."
"I don't want your permission for that. I shall marry him, and yet you have not told whether I'm right."
"Perfectly right, if people be right to marry only for the present. And now let us hear what you have in the unhappy about. Your brother will be pleased. The old lady and the gentleman will not object. I think you will escape from disorderly, comfortless home into a wealthy, respectable one, and you love Edgar, and Edgar loves you. All seems smooth and easy. Where is the obstacle?"
"Here and here," replied Catherine, striking one hand on her forehead and the other on her breast. "In whatever place the soul lives, in my soul and in my heart, I'm convinced I'm wrong."
"Ah, that's very strange.
I cannot make it out. It's my secret, but if you will not mock me, I'll explain it. I can't do it distinctly, but I'll give you a feeling of how I feel." She seated herself by me again. Her countenance grew sadder and graver, and she clasped her hands and trembled. "Nellie, do you ever dream queer dreams?" she said suddenly, after some minutes' reflection. "Well, of course, every now and then," I answered. "And so do I. I've dreamt in my life dreams that have stayed with me ever after and changed my ideas. They've gone through and through me, like wine through water, and altered the color of my mind. And this is one. I'm going to tell it, but take care not to smile at any part of it, though." "Oh, don't be, Miss Catherine," I cried. "We're dismal enough without conjuring up ghosts and visions to perplex us. Come, come, be merry and like yourself. Look at little Hareton. He's dreaming nothing drearily. How sweetly he smiles in his sleep." "Yes, and how sweetly his father curses in his solitude. You remember him, I dare say, when he was just such another as that chubby thing, nearly as young and innocent. However, Nellie, I shall oblige you to listen. It's not long, and I've no power to be merry tonight." "I won't hear it. I won't hear it," I repeated hastily. I was superstitious about dreams then, and am still, and Catherine had an unusual gloom in her aspect that made me dread something from which I might shape a prophecy and foresee a fearful catastrophe. She was vexed, but she did not proceed. Apparently taking up another subject, she recommended in a short time. "If I were in heaven, Nellie, I should be extremely miserable." "Because you are not fit to go there," I answered. "All sinners should be miserable in heaven." "But it is not for that. I dreamt once that I was there." "I'll tell you I won't hearken to your dreams, Mrs. Catherine. I'll go to bed," I interrupted again. She laughed and held me down, for I made a motion to leave my chair. "This is nothing," she cried. "I was only going to say that heaven did not seem to be my home, and I broke my own heart with weeping to come back to earth, and the angels were so angry that they flung me out into the middle of the heath on the top of Wuthering Heights, where I woke sobbing for joy that they will do to explain my secret as well as the other. I've no more business to marry Edgar Linton than I have to be in heaven, and if the wicked man is in there had not brought Heathcliff so low, I shouldn't have thought of it. It would degrade me to marry Heathcliff now, so he shall never know how I love him, and that, not because he is handsome, Nellie, but because he's more myself than I am. Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same, and Linton's is as different as a moonbeam from lightning, or frost from fire." Ere the speech ended, I became sensible of Heathcliff's presence. Having noticed a slight movement, I turned my head, and saw him rise from the bench, and steal out noiselessly. He had listened till he heard Catherine say it would degrade her to marry him, and then he stayed to hear no farther. My companion, sitting on the ground, was prevented by the back of the settee from remarking his presence or departure, but I started and bade her rush. "Why?" she asked, gazing around nervously. "Joseph is here," I answered, catching an opportunity to roll his cartwheels up the road, "and Heathcliff will not come in with him, I am sure, whether he were not at the door this moment." "Oh, he couldn't overhear me at the door," she said. "Give me Hareton while you get supper, and when it is ready, ask me to sup with you. I want to cheat my uncomfortable conscience and be convinced that Heathcliff has no notion of these things. He has not, has he? He does not know what being in love is?" "I see no reason that he should not know as well as you.
I returned, and if you are his choice, he'll be the most unfortunate creature that has ever born. As soon as you become Mrs. Linton, he'll lose friend and love and all. Have you considered how you'll bear the separation, how he'll bear the quiet desert in the world? Because, Miss Catherine,
he is quite deserted. We are separated, she exclaimed, with an accent of indignation. Who is to separate us, pray? They'll meet the fate of Milo. Not as long as I live, Ellen, for no mortal creature. Every Linton on the face of the earth might melt into nothing before I could consent to forsake Heathcliff. Oh, that's not what I intend. That's not what I mean. I shouldn't be Mrs. Linton. Were there such a price demanded? He'll be as much to me as he has been with all my lifetime. Edgar must shake off his antipathy and tolerate him at least. He will, when he learns my true feelings towards him. Nellie, I see now. You think me a selfish wretch. But did it ever strike you that if Heathcliff and I married, we should be beggars? Whereas if I marry Linton, I can aid Heathcliff to rise and place him out of my brother's power.
With your husband's money, Mrs. Catherine? I asked. You'll find him not so pliable as you calculate upon, and though I'm hardly a judge, I think that it's the worst motive you've given yet for being the wife of young Linton.
It is not, she retorted. It is the best. The others were the satisfaction of my whims, and for Edgar's sake, too, to satisfy him. This is the sake of one who comprehends in his person my feelings to Edgar and myself. I cannot express it, but surely you and everybody have a notion that there is or should be an existence of yours beyond you. What were the use of my creation if I were to be entirely contained here? My great miseries in this world have been Heathcliff's miseries, and I watched and felt each from the beginning. My great thought in living is himself. If all else perished and he remained, I should continue to be. And if he were annihilated, the universe would turn into a mighty stranger. I should not seem part of it. My love for Linton is like the foliage in the woods. Time will change it, I'm well aware, as winter changes trees. My love for Heathcliff resembles the eternal rocks beneath, a source of a little visible delight, but necessary. Nellie, I am Heathcliff. He is always, always in my mind, not as a pleasure, any more than I am always a pleasure to myself, but as my own being. So don't talk of our separation again. It's impracticable, and—" She paused and hid her face in the folds of my gown, but I jerked it forcibly away. I was out of patience with her folly. "If I can make any sense of your nonsense, miss," I said, "it only goes to convince me that you are ignorant of the duties you undertake in marrying, or else that you are a wicked, unprincipled girl. But trouble me with no more secrets. I'll not be promised to keep them." "You'll keep that?"
she asked eagerly. "No, I will not promise," she repeated. She was about to insist, then the entrance of Joseph finished our conversation, and Catherine removed her seat to the corner and nursed Hareton, while I made the supper. After it was cooked, my fellow servant and I began to quarrel over who should carry some to Mr. Hindley, and we didn't settle till it all was nearly cold. Then we came to the agreement that we would let him ask if he wanted any, for we feared particularly to go into his presence when he had been some time alone. "Ah, and now at the coming through on the fold. It'll be a time, what about? Get thee, Edel," he demanded the old man, looking round for Heathcliff. "I'll call him," I replied. "He's in the barn, no doubt." I went and called, but got no answer. On returning, I whispered to Catherine that he had heard a good part of what she said, I was sure, and told how I saw him quit the kitchen just as she complained of her brother's conduct regarding him. She jumped up in a fine fright, and flung Hareton into the settle, and ran to seek for her friend herself, not taking leisure to consider why she was so flurried, or how her talk would have affected him. She was absent such a while that Joseph proposed we should wait no longer. He cunningly conjectured that they were staying away in order to avoid hearing his protracted blessing. They were ill enough for only for manners, he affirmed, and on their behalf he added that night a special prayer to the usual quarter of an hour's supplication before meat, and would have tacked another to the end of that grace, had not the young mistress broken in upon him with a hurried command that he must run down the road, and wherever Heathcliff had rambled, find and make him re-enter directly. "I want to speak to him. I must, before I go upstairs," she said, "and the gate is open. He is somewhere out of hearing, for he would not reply, though I shouted at the top of the fold as loud as I could." Joseph objected at first. She was too much in earnest, however, to suffer contradiction, and at last he placed his hat on his head and walked grumbling forth. Meantime, Catherine paced up and down the floor, exclaiming, "I wonder where he is. I wonder where he can be. What did I say, Nellie? I've forgotten. Was he vexed at my bad humor this afternoon? Dear, tell me what I've said to grieve him. I do wish he'd come. I do wish he would." "What a noise for nothing," I cried, though rather uneasy myself. "What a trifle scares you? It's surely no great cause of alarm that Heathcliff should take a moonlight saunter on the moors, or even lie too sulkily to speak to us in the hayloft. I'll engage he's lurking out there. See if I don't ferret him out." I departed to renew my search. Its result was disappointment, and Joseph's quest ended in the same. "Yon lad gets awayer unaware," observed he on re-entering. "He's a left yet the fate of the full swing, and Mrs. a pony has a trodden down the rings on the corn, and a plotted through the right over the meadow. Handsomer." "Have you found Heathcliff, you ass?" interrupted Catherine. "You have been looking for him as I ordered, yes?" "Something more to look alike for the horse," he replied. "It should have been of the more sense, but I canna look nor the horse. Mr. Heathcliff, he's a fine a chap. Good mar he whistle. Happen when a less hard a hearing, will ye?" It was very dark evening for summer. The clouds appeared inclined to thunder, and I said better all sit down, and the approaching rain would be certain to bring him home without further trouble. However, Catherine could not be persuaded into tranquillity. She kept wandering to and fro, and from the gate to the door, and in a state of agitation which permitted no repose, and at length took up a permanent position on one side of the wall, near the road, where rather heedless of my expostulations and the growing thunder, and the great drops that began to plash around her, she remained, calling at intervals, and then listening, and then crying outright. She beat Hareton or any child at a good passionate fit of crying. About midnight, while we were still sat up, the storm came rattling over the heights in full fury. There was a violent wind, as well as thunder, and either one or other split. A tree at one corner of the building, a huge bough, fell through the roof, and knocked down a portion of the east chimney stack, sending a clatter of stones and soot into the kitchen fire. We thought a bolt had fallen in the middle of us, and Joseph swung to his knees, beseeching the Lord to remember the patriarchs Noah and Lot, and all for the former times, spare the righteous, though he smote ungodly. I felt some sentiment that it might be a judgment unto us all. The Jonah in my mind was Mr. Earnshaw, and I shook the handle of his den, that I might be able to ascertain if he was yet living. He replied audibly enough, in a fashion which made my companion vociferate, more clamorously than before, that a wide distinction might be drawn between saints like himself and sinners like his master. But the uproar passed away in 20 minutes, leaving us all unharmed, except Cathy, who got thoroughly drenched for her obstinacy in refusing to take shelter, and standing bonnetless and shawlless to catch as much water as she could with her hair and clothes. She came in and lay down on the settle, all soaked as she was, turning her face to back and putting her hands before it. "Well, miss," I exclaimed, touching her shoulder, "you are not bent on getting your death, are you? Do you know what o'clock it is? 12:30. Come to bed. There's no use waiting longer on the foolish boy. He'll be gone to Gimmerton, and he'll stay there now. He guesses he shouldn't wait for him till this late hour. At least he guesses that only Mr. Hindley would be up, and he'd rather avoid having the door opened by the master."
Nay, he's not at Gimmerton."
Then Joseph interrupted. "So never wonder. Bud's at the bottom of a bog hole. This visitation ain't worth for naught. And out heaven to take a look at you, miss. You'd be next. Thank heaven for all the works together, goodeth to them, the chosen, the spiked a foot of the rubbish. Ya know what the scripture says." And he began quoting several texts, referring to us the chapters and the verses where we might find them. I, having vainly begged the wilful girl to rise and remove her wet things, left him preaching and her shivering, and betook myself to bed with little Hareton, who slept as fast as if anyone had been sleeping around him. I heard Joseph read on a while afterwards. Then I distinguished his slow step on the ladder, and then I dropped asleep. Coming down somewhat later than usual, I saw by the sunbeams piercing the chinks of the shutters, Miss Catherine was still seated near the fireplace. The house door was ajar too. Light entered from the unclosed windows. Hindley came out and stood on the kitchen hearth, haggard and drowsy. "What ails you, Cathy?" he was saying while I entered. "You look as dismal as a drowned whelp. Why are you so damp and pale, child?"
"I've been wet," she answered reluctantly, "and I'm cold, that's all."
"Oh, she's a haughty, naughty girl," I cried, perceiving the master to be tolerably sober. "She got steeped in a shower yesterday evening, and she has been sat there the night through, and I couldn't prevail on her to stir." Mr. Earnshaw stared at us in surprise. "The night through?" he repeated. "What kept her up? Not fear of the thunder, surely? What was over hours since?" Neither of us wished to mention Heathcliff's absence, as long as we could conceal it, so I replied I didn't know how she took it into her head to sit up, and she said nothing. The morning was fresh and cool. I threw back the lattice, and presently the room filled with sweet scents from the garden, but Catherine called peevishly to me.
"Ellen, shut the window. I'm starving."
And her teeth chattered as she shrunk closer to the almost extinguished embers. "She's ill," said Hindley, taking her wrist. "I suppose that's the reason she would not go to bed. Damn it, I don't want to be troubled with more sickness here. What took you into the rain?" "Running after to lads as usual," croaked Joseph, catching an opportunity from our hesitation to thrust in his evil tongue. "If I were you, master, I'd just let us slam a little boards into them face till them gentle and simple. Never a day off. But you can't a Linton comes a seeking hither, and Miss Nelly shoes a fine lass. Shoo, wits a waiting for you in the kitchen, and you're the be at the door. He's at the other end then where the grand lady goes a courting for a side. It's a bonny behaviour looking among them fields after 12 o' midnight, with the fail of flay some divil of a gypsy, Heathcliff. They think I'm a blind, but I'm an mote, and I'm not of the sort. But said the young Linton both a coming and going, and said ya. Ya good for nowt, slightly witch, nip up and bolt up the house. To minute you heard the maister's a horse a fit to clatter to up the road."
"Silence, eavesdropper!" cried Catherine. "None of your insolence before me. Edgar Linton came yesterday by chance. Hindley, and it was I who told him to be off, because I knew you would not like to have met him as you were."
"You lie, Cathy, no doubt," answered her brother, and you are a confounded simpleton. But never mind Linton at present. Tell me, were you with Heathcliff last night? Speak the truth now. You need not be afraid of harming him, though I hate him as much as ever. He did me a good turn a short time since that will make my conscience tender of breaking his neck. To prevent it, I shall send him about his business this very morning, and after he's gone, I'll advise you to look sharp. I shall only have the more humor for you. I never saw Heathcliff last night, answered Catherine, beginning to sob bitterly. And if you do turn him outdoors, I'll go with him. But perhaps you'll never have an opportunity. Perhaps he's gone. Here she burst in an uncontrollable grief, and the remainder of her words were inarticulate. Hindley lavished on her a torrent of scornful abuse, and bade her to get to her room immediately, or she shouldn't cry for nothing. I obliged her to obey, and I shall never forget what a scene she acted when we reached her chamber. It terrified me. I thought she was going mad, and I begged Joseph to run for the doctor. It proved the commencement of delirium. Mr. Kenneth, as soon as he saw her, pronounced her dangerously ill. She had a fever. He bled her, and he told me to let her live on whey and water gruel, and to take care she did not throw herself downstairs or out of the window. And then he left, for he had enough to do in the parish, where there were 2 or 3 miles as the ordinary distance between cottage and cottage. Though I cannot say I made a gentle nurse, and Joseph and the master were no better, and though our patient was as wearisome and headstrong as a patient could be, she weathered it through. Old Mrs. Linton paid us several visits, to be sure, and set things to rights, and scolded and ordered us when Catherine was convalescent. She insisted on conveying to her Thrushcross Grange, for which her deliverance we were very grateful. But the poor dame had reason to repent of her kindness. She and her husband both took the fever, and died within a few days of each other. Our young lady returned to us, saucier and more passionate and haughtier than ever. Heathcliff had never been heard of since the evening of the thunderstorm, and one day I had the misfortune, when she provoked me exceedingly, to lay the blame of his disappearance on her, where indeed it belonged, as she well knew. From that period, for several months, she ceased to hold any communication with me, save in the relation of a mere servant. Joseph fell under a ban also. He would speak his mind and lecture her all the time, as if she were a little girl, and she esteemed herself a woman, and our mistress, and thought that her recent illness gave her a claim to be treated with consideration. Then the doctor had said that she would not bear crossing much. She ought to have her own way, and it was nothing less than the murder in her eyes for anyone to presume to stand up and contradict her. For Mr. Earnshaw and his companions she kept aloof, and tutored by Kenneth, and serious threats of fit that often attended her rages, her brother allowed her whatever she pleased to demand, and generally avoided aggravating her fiery temper. He was rather too indulgent in humoring her caprices, not from affection, but from pride. He wished earnestly to see her bring honor to the family by an alliance with the Lintons, and as long as she let him alone, she might trample us like slaves, for aught he cared. Edgar Linton, as multitudes have been said before, will be after him, as infatuated, and believed himself the happiest man alive on earth the day he led her to Gimmerton Chapel, 3 years subsequent to his father's death. Much against my inclination, I was persuaded to leave Wuthering Heights and accompany her there. Little Hareton was only 5 years old, and I had just begun to teach him his letters. We made a sad parting, but Catherine's tears were more powerful than ours. When I refused to go, and when she found her entreaties did not move me, she went lamenting to her husband and brother. The former offered me munificent wages, the latter ordered me to pack up. He wanted no women in the house, he said, now that there was no mistress, and as to Hareton, the curate would take him in by hand and by the by. And so I had but one choice left, to do as I was ordered. I told the master he got rid of all the decent people, only to run to ruin a little faster. I kissed Hareton goodbye, and since then he has been a stranger, and it's very queer to think it, but I've also no doubt that he has completely forgotten all about Ellen Dean, and that he was ever more than all the world to her, and she to him. At this point of the housekeeper's story, she chanced to glance towards the timepiece over the chimney, and was in amazement on seeing the minute hand measure 1:30. She would not hear of staying a second longer. In truth, I felt rather disposed to defer to the sequel of her narrative myself. And now that she had vanished to rest, I had meditated for another hour or two. I shall summon the courage to go, also in spite of aching laziness of head and limbs. Wow, that was a long chapter. So I hope you guys enjoyed listening to the lovely story so far. I feel like we're starting to get the thick of it and getting to learn more about these characters and who they are. And yeah, so I will be reading this again tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you want, please feel free to like, subscribe, or follow. I do stream on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. So you can catch me when I do stream again. I do go live every evening to read more of Wuthering Heights, and I hope to see you guys there. So until then, I hope you all stay safe and stay geeky as always. Bye for now.